Okay, so just to reiterate, we have attraction, right? Which is something that just happens to us, right? It's something that is a gift. It's something that is part of what makes us human, right? God created us to be attracted to each other. And so when that happens to us, we have two choices, right? We can allow that attraction to lead us to actually doing what is the best for the other person, or we can allow that attraction to lead us to a selfishness, right, that makes us just want to do what's best for us or what we want in the moment and not what is best for the other. Okay.
Yeah, and I offer this to you as a challenge. Mm-hmm. Attraction leads to an encounter. And then every encounter is either an encounter of use or an encounter of love. And I don't mean that to scare you in any way or to lead you to this deep paralysis of, oh my God, am I using everything? But attraction leads to encounter, and every encounter ultimately is either either love or use. Mm-hmm. And that can mean too, like very beautiful things, like very small, simple encounters can be love. And you can love in a real way to the janitor.
Yeah, literally you smile at the postman, and that can be an encounter of love. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be something that's like earth-shattering, right?
Or the postman brings you your mail, and you grab it from him, and you slam the door because all you wanted from him was your mail.
Great analogy.
Well, that's use, because you just wanted him for an end.
Yeah.
So every encounter is either love or use. So encounter that. Think about that.
Yeah. And again, like this is something that maybe is the first time that you've really been thinking about this. And so that might be a little bit daunting or a little bit scary. And it doesn't need to be. This is something that all of us experience the fall, right? All of us experience sin. And so all of us sometimes experience the impulse to use another person, even if it's something just as simple as being a jerk to the postman, right? And so that's something that we kind of have to work on, right? And we work on with Jesus, and he gives us the grace in order to be able to change, right? And so that's something that happens over time. So we don't have to freak out if we're not really good at this right now, right? But this is a process. All right. The next question I want to talk about is a word that is very misunderstood. And a lot of people say this word and they throw it around, but I think they don't really know what it means. And that word is chastity. So what is chastity?
Yeah, so let's start with the Catechism. The Catechism says that it's a training ground in human freedom. What the heck does that mean? Okay, that's not helpful. What is a training ground in human freedom? Well, chastity is ultimately, it's about creating a pure heart within us. So it is the exercises by which we create a pure heart. And let's remember the Beatitudes. Blessed are the pure of heart, for they will see God. So chastity is the vehicle by which we see God in other people. So ultimately, and we need to discuss the difference between positive purity and negative purity. And positive meaning it is an action of encounter, and negative meaning it's an action without encounter. Not that negative purity is bad, because if you look at a girl or if you look at a boy and you're tempted to lust, and you're not only tempted but you're going to succumb to lustful thoughts, look away. Negative purity is not bad. Negative purity is a good thing. If you cannot overcome a temptation to lust, look away. But ultimately, that's the beginning.
Right, it's not the end. So this is a story that you guys have already heard. I believe they're in the chapter 2 videos. But Jason Everett told a story about a bishop, Bishop Nonus, and he saw the prostitute, Pelagio, walking across the street, and he was with a group of other bishops. And so there were bishops that shielded their eyes when they saw her because she wasn't wearing hardly anything and she was very beautiful. And so they shielded their eyes, whereas Bishop Nonus looked at her and they had this encounter of she actually felt real love and not use from him, right? So he saw her as a human person, was able to appreciate her dignity, and even just with the type of glance that he gave her, she was willing to see, or she was able to see, that he was loving her and not just using her. Okay, so he was exercising positive purity. So this is something that Bishop Nonus would have had to develop over time, right? This is something that clearly he had been working on in his life, such that then he was free to look at her, even if she didn't have a lot on and she was dressed as a prostitute. He was able to actually see her dignity and treat her as such. Whereas the other bishops maybe hadn't gotten to that part of their journey yet. Maybe they hadn't developed that virtue as well as Bishop Nonus had yet. And so the correct thing for them to do in that situation was to shield their eyes, which was the negative purity, right? But again, that's not the end. So the end goal would be to be like Bishop Nonus, right? But that is something that, again, is a process. So it takes time.
And so one thing practically and then one thing philosophically. So practically, the Holy Spirit will lead you where you need to go. So don't go seeking out opportunities to practice to practice positive purity, but that's just not how it works. Just know where you are and know that if you can't see God in the other person, if you can't see the other person with a gaze of love, if you're going to see them with a gaze of use, then you look away. So chastity, it's a capacity. It's an ability, much like the ability to play a guitar. It's something that is developed. And what is this ability for? So guitar, you play the guitar to be able to make music. What is the ability of chastity for? Well, it's to see God in the other person and to love them.
Right.
So chastity doesn't mean not having sex. We're called to be chaste in marriage. So when we have sex in marriage, it's called to be an act of love. It's called to be an act of gift. It's called to be an act where we are doing everything that we can for the good, for the ultimate good of the other. But then outside of marriage, outside of the bounds of marriage, where you don't have the support system needed to make a total and free gift of self, then we know that it's not good. So therefore we know it's not chaste because it is. So chastity is not just about sex. Sex it's just like baseball, or excuse me, just like playing the guitar isn't just about the C chord. The C chord is part of playing the guitar, but it's not. There's so many other chords, and there's their interaction, there's melody, there's rhythm, there's a million other things. Chastity is the ability to love other people. It's the ability to see God in other people.
Right. So chastity and abstinence can coincide, but they also are not always the same thing, right? So it's possible for you to be married and to not be chaste, and that will be a problem, right? You can actually use your spouse just to get something from them, to get a feeling, to get an emotional reaction from them, or to get some moment of pleasure from them without actually caring what's best for them in that moment. And so that's possible even within marriage. Outside of marriage, again, you mentioned that it's always going to be unchaste to have sex outside of marriage. Why? Because marriage provides, like you said, the support system. You've made a vow. You've committed your whole life to this person. And so there's a safety in that. If I then give my body to this person, there's a safety there that they're not going to just go off and share that with a bunch of other people, or that they're going to go off and do that with a bunch of other people. But you're the only one that is there in that relationship, and you can have this intimacy without fear, right? And so that is why it's necessary to have that vow, right, in order to give that support system and that safety net.
Right. And let's just one more word about marriage. It's a reality in our country that the divorce rate's very high right now. And I personally, this is just my thoughts on it, I think that has a lot to do with a misunderstanding of the word chastity. So we're taught, don't have sex before marriage, that's what chastity is. And so then we think once we get into marriage, it's do whatever you want, it doesn't matter. Well, why do most marriages that don't work? I think it's because people realize that the other person doesn't have their best interests at heart.
Right.
If your spouse has your best interests at heart, that's someone who you can trust. That's someone who you know is always going to be on your side. And generally, and probably more than generally, it's going to work out better in the long run if you stay together.
Yeah. You have a person who's willing to sacrifice for you, right? So if you get in a situation in this relationship, and the best thing for you, maybe even within marriage, the best thing for you in that moment or in that season is to abstain from sex, that person is going to be able to control their own desires and say, you know what, that's okay because I love you and I'm willing to sacrifice for this period of time for you.
Yeah. So then we started with the catechism, we'll end with the catechism on chastity. It's a training ground for human freedom. So what's something to understand is that it's not a checklist, like, oh, boom, okay, I didn't have sex before marriage, and I love my wife, and I will what's good for her, so like, boom, I'm done. No, it's a training ground. So that means it's a constant struggle. Chastity is you choosing to see God in the other person, and then to see more of it every single day. We're never done exercising the virtue of chastity.
Right.
So a training ground in human freedom. Ultimately, chastity leads to freedom. But proximally, right now, chastity is about choosing to see God in the other person. And we can always do that more. We can always do that more. So remember, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Not only in heaven, right now. Right now they will see God.
Right now.